guys, my name is Steph and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in May. I can't really believe that it is June already. I don't know what happened to May, but that is probably because I read 11 books. I'm not going to talk about the books in any particular order because I am not starting June off very organized. So the very first book that I read this month was The Possession by Annie Ernaux. When I found this book, I thought that I had kind of discovered this amazing author that nobody knew about. And then I googled Annie Ernaux and it turns out she is a Nobel Prize winner and I'm just kind of late to get on the train. This book is a sort of an essay, I suppose, of emotionally charged navel-gazing where Ernaux is processing through and describing her experience of jealousy, watching her ex-lover start a new relationship with somebody else and how that really takes hold of her. I just love the way that she describes things. I find it just incredibly engaging and engrossing and beautiful without being heavy. I'm gonna just read an excerpt of it because I think that will probably give you a better idea of the way that she writes better than my going on about how wonderful she is. In the private film that was constantly playing inside me, featuring happy moments to come, a night out, a vacation, a birthday dinner, all of this autofiction anticipating the pleasures of a normal life was supplanted by the images that were rushing in from the outside to stab me in the chest. I was no longer free in my daydreams. I was no longer the subject of even my own fantasies. I was being inhabited by a woman I had never seen. Her writing is so sharp and clear and creates such a wonderful, haunting image. And the way that she describes things, I can identify with. Like when she talks about this, like, oh, I've been there. I know what she's talking about. So I thought it was a really wonderful book. I totally recommend it. And I'm really looking forward to picking up all of her other works. I also read The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. This was a great book. This is definitely, I think this could be one of my favorite books of the year, to be honest. I always love Holly Black. She's never really disappointed me, but this one is sort of a follow-up to The Queen of Nothing from the Folk of the Air series. It's in a different perspective from Princess Serpent, who at the end of the last series was like a very small side character. And so this book starts several years after the events of Queen of Nothing. Serpent has been living in the woods as like a feral fairy child, and she is one day collected by Prince Oak, who's grown up and of course is very handsome, and they essentially go on a quest together. I love how Holly Black stays so true to the characters throughout the book, and I really love how all of her characters are very unique and precise and have a very distinct voice. There's this part of the book that I find just hilarious when Serpent is in this fairy revel and she's been in the woods, so she gets totally overstimulated and is like trying to process everything that's happening and how overwhelmed she's feeling, and she's just telling herself like, do not scream, do not bite, do not cry, like just let it wash over you kind of thing. Another thing I love about her writing style is how many allusions to kind of classical traditional fairy tales there are, especially in this book. I feel like there's a lot of allusions to Snow White. It is in no way a retelling, but there are a lot of things that kind of remind you of the classic Snow White. I think it adds like a layer of magic to everything that just makes it a lot of fun. When I finally finished this book, I wanted to scream, and that was partly because of those last few pages, the ending. I just was so excited and overwhelmed, like oh my god, it was so good. But also that, oh my god, I have to wait almost an entire year for the next one. So that's The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. I loved it. I also finally got a 5-star read from Emily Henry, and that is Happy Place. I have enjoyed all of Emily Henry's books, but they have never been like 5-star reads for me. There's something about the characters often that I don't connect with them in any way, or their sort of arc or journey. I just don't, it just doesn't work for me. This one really worked for me. I loved it. And I think some of that could be that it's the second chance romance trope. It's one of my favorite tropes ever. This book is about a group of friends that go on a vacation together in this sort of cabin. And there's been a couple in that group of friends that have been together for very, very long. And they break up. And then the time for the vacation rolls around again, and they pretend to be together because neither of them have been able to handle the idea of telling their friends that their relationship has come to an end. And so they basically end up fake dating for a week, and I mean, fall in love again, obviously. I think this book is also really an example of how much Emily Henry has grown as an author and in her craft of writing. Because when I compare it to You and Me on Vacation, which I think is her first book, and the book that I think has the most similarities, where that one is a Friends to Lovers, and she's kind of telling the story of these people through their relationship and their lives, and then telling like the present moment and present experience of falling in love. With You and Me on Vacation, there felt like there was just a lot of filler, but Happy Place was a very different experience. It felt like she really knew what she was doing. Happy Place was excellent. I loved it. It was so much fun. I also read Lady Chatterley's Lover. This is an older book that was published in the 1920s. And I picked this up because I really love the Netflix movie. I thought it was very romantic, and the way that it was shot was quite dreamy, and I was curious how the novel compared. Because Lady Chatterley's Lover is about a woman who is in a sexless marriage following World War I. And she really wants to get pregnant. She wants to have a child and have a family. And so her husband just kind of tells her, like, go get pregnant. If sex and love can be divided, you don't need to have them from the same person. Then just go have sex with somebody and get pregnant, and we'll raise the baby as our own. And so she does, and she takes on a lover, and it's a romance, so she falls in love with that lover. And there's a lot of issues of like class, and it's also the first book that talked about women's pleasure explicitly on the page. And so I was very curious about that, and I did enjoy it. It was very interesting. I actually really enjoyed the aspects of class, but I did a vlog on this, so I won't say too much more, but it's a book of its time as well. So I'm glad I read it, but it's a book of its time. After that, I read a book called Lothaire. This is by Cressley Cole, who, if you don't know, is a paranormal romance writer. And it is the 11th, I think, book in a paranormal romance series. And I didn't love it. I've been working on this series for a very long time, mostly because I wanted to read this book. And this book is supposed to be one of the best villain romances. Yeah. I don't even know how to even begin explaining. I'm gonna try. It's in our world, and it's kind of like Monster Mash. There's like a whole pile of supernatural creatures, like everything you can possibly think of. There's sort of this overarching conflict between them, and there's lots of like alliances and world building stuff. Each book has a different couple that falls in love, and they often fall in love across species, and that becomes like part of the conflict. So Lothaire is the enemy of old. He is like sort of the background bad guy in all of the other books. And so people love this book. And so I thought like, okay, I like a good vampire book. He's a vampire, obviously. Lothaire falls in love with a human who is sharing a body kind of with a vampire goddess. He isn't sure if the human or the vampire goddess is his fated mate. And so he's trying to figure this out. My kind of constant frustration with these books is that the guys in it are very alpha, and like alpha to the point that they are a little bit like cavemen, like my woman. And I don't know, I'm kind of tired of it. I think I'm gonna just take a little break from the series. It's not a bad series. I actually do enjoy some of the books a lot. I think it was so hyped in my mind that there was no way that it was going to possibly live up to my expectations as well. So I don't know. That was Lothaire. I read a lot of romance this month. So I followed that, I think, by Shipped. And Shipped was sold kind of as a hating game meets The Unhoneymooners, and that is pretty much exactly what it is. These two people who are working against each other to get a promotion, and then for romance reasons, they have to go on this cruise together. I don't know if I mentioned, they work for a cruise ship company. And so they're in like the social media department, and they go on this cruise together, and they're kind of competing to like take the best pictures and make the best posts to kind of get this promotion. And it was a fun book. It was pretty well written, and I think it's a very good book if you're looking for a romance where you know exactly what's going to happen and you want like the comfort of that. Because there was like no part that surprised me at all. You read a scene and you know what's happening. And so it was a good read, but it wasn't surprising. It wasn't terribly exciting, to be honest. So that was shipped. After that, I read The Inheritance Games, and when I started this book, I did not realize that it was, first of all, YA, and I didn't realize it was part of a series. So I got a bit of a surprise, but The Inheritance Games basically starts off just like Knives Out. There's a young woman who inherits a shitload of money from a billionaire, and as a condition of this, she has to live in the billionaire's house to inherit the money for like 1 year. And there's all of these like dramatic dynamics with his family that didn't really inherit any money, and his grandsons who also live in the house. The billionaire really loves riddles, and so that is kind of what the story revolves around, is the grandfather's kind of left clues around the house, and you're kind of following this young woman and the boys trying to figure out like, how did he know her, what's going on, what's sort of his like last trick or his last riddle for them to solve. The dynamics of the four boys kind of reminded me a little bit of the guys from the Raven boys. They're all a little odd or unusual guys. They go to a prep school, and then there's this one girl. But as I said, it's YA, and so the middle had a lot more sort of romantic tension and was focused pretty heavily on that than I was expecting. Which wasn't bad, but I think my main sort of critique of the book is that it is so heavily focused on unlocking these riddles, but I like it when all of the information that I need is on the page, and that I as a reader could technically have worked this out for myself. I like that experience of reading it, having the grand reveal, and then realizing I was just too dumb to figure it out. But I feel like this book, like, she just kind of would pull the reveal out, and there's no way I could have guessed it. The information wasn't there on the page. So it was still a really good read. It was still fun, but I would have really liked a little bit more build up. So that's The Inheritance Games. I read one memoir this month, and that's Beyond the Wand by Draco Malfoy, the Harry Potter guy. What's his name? Tom Felton. Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton. And this is sort of a memoir about his experiences growing up, especially as part of the Harry Potter franchise, and him kind of offering a lot of like fun behind the scenes stuff that I feel like I always wanted when I was a kid. And so I found that like very fun. You know, it was a lot of like his relationships with the other cast members and how he chose to interpret his character and developed as an actor, and how it just kind of affected his personal life as well. It was really fun. He narrated the audiobook that I listened to. I really enjoyed also the part where he kind of talks a little bit about how he was affected by the film's ending and trying to decide what his career should look like after that. Should he even stay in acting? And he talks a little bit about his struggle with alcoholism as well. Yeah, I just really enjoyed this book. I thought it was great. It was very short as well. It was like a 7-hour audiobook. So that's Beyond the Wand. I think it's a really fun book for anyone who is or was a fan of Harry Potter before the Rowling fiasco. It's really a book that focuses a lot on the actor's development and personal journey experience from the other side of the screen, you could say. I have been watching videos about the Serpent and the Wings of Night. I see it floating around BookTube like crazy lately, and so I just thought I would give it a go, and I loved it. It is definitely one of those kind of Sarah J. Maas inspired books where it's got, you know, we have a tournament, we have a sexy bat boy flying around, but I feel like there is still a very unique spin on it, and that Carissa Broadbent really still made this story something unique that is her own. And dare I say, I do actually think this is a better book than some of the Maas books that I've read, because I think that she has quite good editing. Don't shoot me, please. This is about a human girl named Aurea who grows up in the court of vampires. She's like the adoptive daughter of the vampire king, or a vampire king, and she is kind of like the badass tough girl who has really struggled to survive in this world that she is food. She's like the main meal. Her sort of plan is that she is going to support her father in his reign, essentially by entering this tournament where if you win the tournament, you get to have a wish granted, any wish of your heart, from Nyaxia, who is the vampire's goddess. So the story is just her going through and trying to survive in any way that she possibly can, and that includes teaming up with, as I said, the very sexy winged man who is also a vampire and sort of helps her along. I don't know what it was about this book, but it was kind of like it just had crack in it and I couldn't get enough. The writing is pretty good. I think that there's a lot of time spent with the characters, so you kind of get to know them pretty well. For me, I think it was actually the ending that really did it. Like, I was enjoying it a lot throughout and I was like hooked. But the ending was so explosive. It was totally, for some reason, unexpected. I did not really see it coming. And I think that I've read enough books at this point where that is a little bit harder to do for me as a reader. So I don't know if I wasn't paying enough attention or if she really just knocked it out of the park, but I'm very excited for the second book. I don't know when I'm gonna have time to read it, but I'm definitely gonna end up making that a priority because I think I'm addicted. I also read Howl's Moving Castle, another train. I'm getting on a lot of trains this month. This I didn't really know anything about. It's in middle grade, and it was written in the 80s, which I didn't realize it was quite that old either. I thought it was like the early 2000s. It's about a girl named Sophie who is a seamstress, and she is cursed by the Witch of the Waste. And she becomes this old woman, and it's hilarious. It's wonderful. So she's this old woman with these aches and these pains, and she joins Howl, who is kind of this notorious wizard in his castle, which moves across the land and kind of terrifies people, and people are like locking their daughters inside at night kind of thing. And Howl is this like very eccentric, flashy guy who has sort of troubles and things going on of his own that she kind of gets mixed up in while making a deal with a demon who also lives in the castle to get rid of this horrible curse. So it was a delightful book. I had so much fun reading it. I feel like you can actually see a lot of influence from Howl's Moving Castle on a lot of the fantasy that I have grown up with. Now I wonder if they were influenced by Diana Wynne Jones. And I'm really glad that I finally got to it. I'm looking forward to watching the animation as well. So the final book that I read this month was The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. This book is written from two perspectives. The first one is the bridegroom. It's a man who marries a woman named Inigo, and she tells him, like, whatever you do, you can't ask about my history, don't ask me where I came from or anything from before our relationship. I want to start fresh. And he's sort of like, well, okay, you're super hot, and like, I'll just go with it. Her aunt gets sick, and so she has to go back home to where she grew up, the House of Dreams, and he begins to poke a little bit at her past. He does a little bit of digging, and then we get introduced to another point of view, which is back in the past from a girl who grew up being friends with Inigo. They're sort of strange girls that believe in fairies and believe in magic and have a very complicated relationship to each other. And so you're sort of slowly piecing together, what is she trying to hide? I really loved this book. I guessed the twist about halfway through, which is too bad, but at the same time, I don't really feel like it took away my enjoyment that much because it's just so beautifully written. And I love so many of the tropes that are involved in it as well. Like, you kind of have the house as a character, a lot of very classic Gothic stuff. This moment of like, wait, are there fairies in this book? Is this magic? Or are these girls just creating this internal world of their own? So that's all I've read this month. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Do let me know what kind of books you read in May, and if you read any of the same ones as me, let me know what your thoughts are. Also, if you have any suggestions for my June TBR, do leave those in the comments for me as well. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.